Welcome. I'm Mike Lacey, and I am grateful to have Mr. Vic Tarleton with me. Vic is a cornerback from the BYU Cougars back in the 90s, but now he's still involved in football as an official. So even though he's not wearing a striped jersey, and it's probably a good thing he isn't because he'd be very intimidating to me. It's good to have you here with us, Vic. Thank you for being with us on Beyond the Game.
Oh, no problem. Mike, thank you for the opportunity to be here and get to have this incredible experience and just share anything I can just to help out. And it's just nice to be with that football family.
You know, it is. It is. Did you get a chance? I didn't know everybody there. I think there were 500 people there. But they had the 100 years of BYU football. Had you heard about that? This was this summer.
I wasn't able to make it. And The reason why is because with officiating college football, during the summers, I spend times at camps and clinics. And I like to give back as well with individuals coming up because I know what it's like to start from the bottom and try to work your way. And so I wasn't able to attend because of that.
Well, I'm not sure where to start here, Vic, but I love that you were a cornerback for BYU. And I'm curious, how close did you get to people like LaVell Edwards? Well, how tight do you feel? I know you came from a junior college, Sacramento City College, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you were here at BYU for 2 years. What's your affiliation with our Cougars?
Well, I have a very strong passion for the Cougars. I bleed blue.
Especially when he's officiating.
Exactly. And I'm just grateful because my situation, we all have a story in regards to how life takes us. And for me, growing up, born and raised Sacramento, California, and going throughout high school and going to junior college, and one of the things that, as I was hoping to get an opportunity to play college football somewhere else, just didn't know where, when, and whom. But when BYU became an opportunity, I was like, wow, I was not real familiar with BYU at all. And we had some family friends in Sacramento that were avid BYU fans.
Really?
And
were they in Rancho Cordova?
They were in Rancho Cordova. So
what was their name?
The Buellers. Dr. Bueller, he was a dentist.
Yeah. Ronald
Bueller, yes.
Oh, my heavens.
Yes. And so what happened is my grandmother helped take care of his mother when he moved his mother from Idaho to Rancho Cordova. And so that's how our families began our relationship. And so by me playing all the sports I played throughout the years of growing up, he would watch me. And around the end of my junior college career, season was coming to an end. That's when I became acquainted with Coach Tom Ramage, and he was recruiting in that area there. And I just went home and told my grandmother, hey, I'm getting recruited by BYU and a couple other schools. And so she went to Dr. Bueller, and Dr. Bueller said that's where he's going to school. He's not going anywhere else.
As I recall, and this was when I was young. I knew them when I was very young, but he had a pretty good-sized family.
Yes, he did. Yes. And I want to say there's 3 or 4 daughters and 1 son.
I kind of remember that.
Yeah. And
in fact, when we were baptized into the church as converts, he later became our bishop. That's so interesting. I'm going to have to tell the story of how we met, but let's touch a little bit more on your athletic experiences at Cordova. What sports did you play? Because that school, at least back in the 70s and 80s and maybe even the 90s, I don't know, was one of the powerhouses in all of Northern California.
I'll have to agree with you as being a powerhouse because we were doing a lot of good things in most sports.
Yeah.
So I played football, basketball from my sophomore to senior year. And then I played baseball my sophomore year.
Was Guy Anderson your
Guy
coach?
Anderson was not my coach. My coach was Dave Culberson. I just played the sophomore.
Okay.
Guy Anderson was over the varsity team.
Varsity coach.
And one of the challenges for me is because I played football and baseball, you wanted to make a commitment.
Especially you were a
Quarterback, yes.
And under, man, I keep coming back to how you and I met. This is just so enjoyable, so ironic how we met. But one more question before we get there. What, you went from high school sports outside of Sacramento, in Sacramento, to Sacramento City College. Tom Ramage from BYU recruited you. Were there other colleges that recruited you?
Yeah, so I took a couple other trips, and I went to, my first trip was to Idaho University, and when the recruiting coach there, and John L. Smith was a head coach at the time, but his defensive coordinator was recruiting me, and I didn't
So
know.
you were being recruited as a cornerback.
As a cornerback. I didn't really know much about Moscow, Idaho, so that was a
Who does?
treat of an experience.
Kidding.
I thought I was going to Russia, to be honest, but they probably hear that pretty common.
It's funny, we lived in New Mexico, and to get from Farmington, New Mexico to Albuquerque, you have to drive through Cuba.
Oh.
And yeah, I thought, how do you get to that island from here? But Cuba, New Mexico is a town. Moscow, Idaho.
Yeah, so that was my first trip, though.
How big of a town is Moscow?
I'm just gonna say it's more just the university life.
Okay.
I'm probably gonna say small town, probably Provo, a little smaller, somewhere in there.
Sure.
That area there, and then I took a trip to Idaho. Then I took my trip to BYU, and then I took my last trip to San Jose State.
Oh. Now there's a kid from Cordova that played at San Jose State, but I'm not sure if he played football. And he was a great running back at San Jose State.
I know who you're talking about. Gerald Willhite.
Gerald Willhite.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because at San Jose State, he did wonderful.
Oh, he was great.
And didn't he play in the NFL for a while?
With the Broncos.
With the Broncos.
And he had that bad break of his leg.
Oh, my. I was in New Mexico then. I wasn't paying enough attention. Wow. No, but Cordova had some wonderful running backs too, and I guess some good quarterbacks.
Yeah. I mean, we were pretty.
I'm trying to be funny there.
No, we were pretty deep. I was more of the running quarterback, not the quarterback, which was good. You have to use what you have, but yeah, I mean, we were notorious for our running backs, our defenses, our offensive line, and I mean, we were doing a lot of good things.
Let me introduce to our audience how you and I met, because to me this was just kind of one of those serendipity kind of wonderful little things that happen in life. But we were coming back from St. Louis. We were visiting with our daughter and her family in St. Louis, and then we came back Sunday. And this was the weekend of the BYU Oklahoma State game. So anyway, and I guess in Utah there were a lot of student breaks, or, the break time. So there were usually where we park, which is called the parking spot. There's a bus waiting for us. As soon as we get out of the terminal, it takes us right to our car, and zoom, 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 we're gone. We're home. And this time there was a giant line. In fact, the line was so big that, those buses take maybe 16 people. And I was thinking, wow, all these people divided by 16, that's going to be quite a few trips before we're being picked up. And fortunately, or whatever, there were some people that were in the wrong line because they were waiting for a park and fly bus or whatever. And that was interesting because as we got closer to being allowed on the bus, the people right behind us, a couple, maybe a child, saw that they were actually on this park and ride bus. And so they left right behind me. And I saw this young man, looked very athletic, handsome. I tried to make eye contact with you, but I don't know what you were doing. You might have been looking at your phone. But my wife and I looked like we were going to be the last ones on the bus. And they let us on, and then there was one more seat. I tried to make myself look big so that, no, I'm kidding. But Vic, you were right behind us.
Yes.
And you came on, you sat down next to me. And so anyway, we struck up a conversation. And I asked him, hey, where are you coming in from? And as I recall, you said erroneously, Sacramento.
Yes.
And then you fixed that. He said, well, actually Spokane. I said, well, that's interesting because I'm from Sacramento. And so, Vic, what did you say?
I said, I'm from Sacramento, too.
So
born and raised.
Well, that's interesting. Well, actually, I told him, I said, I'm actually not from Sacramento specifically. I'm from Rancho Cordova. What did you say?
I said, me too.
That's right. And I don't know how it turned to, well, I was a Cordova Lancer.
Me too.
Me too. And so it just kept going. And BYU or Cordova was known, for a long, long time as a great football school, also a great baseball school. So I don't know. I think I asked you if you played football there.
Yes. And I said, yes, I did.
You said, yes, I did. And you were a quarterback.
Yes.
And I think you asked me, who was your coach? Yeah. And I said, well, Dewey Guerra and Ron Lancaster.
I said, I know both of them.
Yeah. So who was your coach? Max Miller. And Max Miller was the guy who came in right after Coach Guerra. And I knew Max Miller because he had been the baseball coach for Rio Americano High School, kind of a rival for Cordova High School. They're right across the river. We were all call it the poor side of the river, and they're the rich side of the river.
Right? Exactly.
So anyway, and then, I don't know how it came up. Maybe I just brought it out of the air. I said, well, I came on and played at BYU. And what did you say?
Me too.
So did I. Said, I mean, how cool. And so then you were able to tell me about how you officiate ball games now.
Yeah, and I said, now I officiate college football and work Big Sky Conference USA, and I was just actually coming back from a game in Spokane.
And I think Eastern Washington had played.
I was Cal Poly played Idaho University.
Oh, okay.
So I was coming back from Moscow, but we stayed in Coeur d'Alene and then flew out of Spokane.
You also told me, now here we are the week between Oklahoma State and UCF games for BYU. I mean, that's when I played at BYU, you told people, the era you played with was by which quarterback was.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was there with Mark Wilson and Jim McMahon.
And then I was there with John Walsh, Steve Clemens, Ryan Hancock.
I remember those days.
And then John Walsh.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm mostly interested in your officiating because there's got to be some great stories there. But it's so fun to connect via Rancho Cordova. And the Cordova Lancers, at least in my era, we were extremely unique. These were our socks. In baseball, they called these sanitaries. The socks that you wore to keep everything else clean on your ankles, I guess. I don't know. But in football, we weren't afraid to be a little unique. And Max Miller probably changed some of those traditions, but for somehow, and this happened, do you remember Jerry Manuel?
Yes.
Jerry Manuel was one of the best athletes ever at BYU, at Cordova. And I remember he was recruited to play football for a lot of schools because he's one of the best receivers ever. But he went and played Major League Baseball for a very long time. A second base at the Detroit Tigers. And he was, until only years ago, he was the manager for, was it the Tigers or maybe it was the Mets?
Probably, I'm not sure exactly. But
yeah. But anyway, very famous professional athlete. Anyway, Cordova, we had these interesting socks. And for those of you just listening, it looks like a barbershop, light thing or whatever. And then on our helmets. Now, I don't know, Vic, you may not have had this, but back in the 60s and 70s, daisies were a cool thing, hippies and flower children, so on our helmets, if you had a great touchdown or a tackle or something, you got to put a daisy on your helmet. And nobody made fun of us because nobody could beat us. And I say that with great humility. But anyway, Vic, you continued that tradition at Cordova. Tell us, what in your opinion, why did Rancho Cordova, California back then have such a great athletic tradition?
I would have to say it started with, I'm going to say, with the community of Rancho Cordova of its own, because not only did we have Rancho Cordova, but we also had Mather Air Force Base. And so every once in a while, we would get some athletes from Mather Air Force Base. They would come in and they would play with us, and they would add to the athletes that we already had within our community there in Rancho Cordova. And with the youth sports that which they had there, so depending on what sport you play, you usually played a youth, whether it's Pop Warner or whether it was baseball, basketball. I mean, there was always some type of athletic something going on. And I remember as a young kid, not just doing those athletics, but going to the park and playing with friends all the time. Sun up to sundown.
Going and playing basketball on base at Mather Air Force Base, because that's where you could play real ball.
Yes.
So we were just high school kids, but we're taking our game to the base to play against these men.
Yeah.
And that was a challenge. I'm glad you brought that up. There were some other factors that made it unique, because Rancho Cordova was a community unto itself, even though it was a suburb of Sacramento. And there were two junior highs that fed into Cordova only, Mills and Mitchell. And the rivalry there was, I don't know, in my years, it was a bear of a rivalry.
It was a rivalry, and I went to Mills myself. So
I went to both, and so they hated me.
Yeah.
I think they both hated me. Like that 90% of the officiating would not like it.
It's kind of funny because, like you say, that rivalry at the junior high school level was very intense.
Very.
But then once you went to Cordova,
now they're your teammates.
Exactly. You're playing.
But I felt the same way as you. And this, I don't want to make this sound inappropriate, but Mather Air Force Base was a unique, there they had the nuclear arsenal, on those B-52s, these big lumbering jets. And there were a lot of officers. And so the kids that came from Mather Air Force Base to me seemed very disciplined.
Very disciplined.
Really. And disciplined, but we were diverse.
Yes, very diverse.
The whole school, it was a big school.
Yes.
And again, I was young. I'm from California. And when people talked about racism, I just didn't feel it.
Yeah.
No, really. At that school,
you're right. Yeah. No.
We were all friends.
Yeah. Friends, played everything. And yeah.
We in our backfield, I know I wasn't the only white guy, but I was one of the few white dudes, and I was a starter. We called ourselves the Ethnics. We had a Samoan, African Americans, or black guys, and I felt a love and a unity there that just was fascinating. And so let's switch over, because I come to BYU, which is a church school, but these kids are frequently from Utah and Idaho, and it felt a little different. So how did you feel when you came to Utah? Did you feel a little different? Or, I mean, sometimes to me, it was a cultural or it was a naivety. Maybe I'm saying too much.
No, you're right. And my thing is, when I came, individuals would always check on me, say, Vic, are you okay? Are you doing okay? And I'm like, you don't know where I grew up. I mean, where I grew up is very diverse, as you previously mentioned. And we just basically loved each other. We got along very well, and we just played and had a lot of good times together, that type of thing. And so when I had the opportunity to come to BYU, for me, it really wasn't a big change. There wasn't anything like brand new. I was just at Brigham Young University.
One more guy on the team.
Yeah, just another athlete on the team, just wanting to play and wanting to compete and do everything we can to win. And so my thing is, I just enjoyed the fact that coming to Provo, I didn't have to worry about my personal safety
Amen to that, right?
as I would in certain situations.
Laramie.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah. And so for me, I mean, Provo was like, I was like, man, I didn't know there was a place on earth like Provo, just because it's just so unique in its own right and in its own way. And a lot of my friends growing up with, they were like, in my junior college, they were like, man, Vic, I wish I could have gone with you. But everybody has their own experience.
That's right.
And I mean, it's been great. And even going back to what you had mentioned in regards to Coach Edwards is, to me, he was a father figure to everyone.
He was.
And just as loving and kind and understanding.
So even though you were here only 2 years, you still felt like you had the full experience of relationships and education and.
Oh yeah. And we would go in the coach's office, not in his office, but in the office where Shirley would sit there.
Yep.
And
Shirley, she was there for a while, wasn't she?
yeah. And we'd just sit out there and just kind of hang out there and in between classes or practices. And
you were a basketball player at Cordova. So was I. Did you spend any time in the Smith Fieldhouse playing ball?
We did. We did. We did play some.
Those are some of the best games I remember. And there were times in the off season when the guys from the basketball team would come out, and we had some battles, but it was fun. It was fun. So I assume you were a point guard?
Yeah, point guard.
Okay. But you couldn't shoot, I'm sure.
No.
No, I'm kidding.
I was more of a 2-3-1 if needed, that type of thing.
So did you really concentrate on assists, or you were a shooter? I'm sure you were.
No, not really shooter. I was more of a rebounder and more of a defense.
Really?
Yeah, just
penetrate at all?
If I got the ball, yeah. If I got the ball and I had a little area to go, we would get there.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. All right, so we told the story of how we met. We talked a little bit about your BYU experience, and I'm glad to hear that. That's such good news, because when I came in the 1970s, BYU had, and a lot of schools had only recently started to kind of bring in all the different types of athletes. So for me, coming from Cordova, where I felt like everybody was my teammate, it didn't feel as diverse at first, but by the time I was done, it was nice that we had guys from so many different parts of the country, and it brings a level of understanding and some, I don't know, to me, I learned at that moment that diversity brings new knowledge, new understanding, new capacities, experiences to, this is a big world we live in.
Yeah, and my thing, what I enjoyed is being able to learn from the teammates as you get to know each other better and get to spend time with them, whether it's on the practice field, on the field during a game, or you're in the classrooms with them, or just study hall with them. I mean, you just get to know everybody at a little different level.
Correct. Well, Vic, tell us a little bit. Now you're an official. Do you travel every weekend?
Yeah, so usually between about the last week of August, that's when the football season starts to kick off. So I'm usually out of town from the last week of August, usually until like about the week of Thanksgiving. I might have, during those weeks, I'll probably have maybe 2 to 3 weeks throughout that duration where our crew that I'm assigned with may not be working.
I think you told me on the bus that you'll be doing a game soon. Now, I don't know if this episode will come out then. It'll probably be afterwards, but that you're going to be on ESPN with a game with Montana State or...
Yeah, so that's that game will be on November 9th, and it'll be on ESPN2, and it's going to be UC Davis at University of Montana. And it's a late evening game. I think it's about 8:15.
That's going to be a little cool.
It's going to be real cool, and I'm just hoping there's no snow on the ground.
You told me at the time that that you have an H or an F?
F. I'm field judge.
You're the field judge.
Yes.
So the field judge, where does he stand, he or she?
So I stand behind the defense on the sideline.
Okay.
And I'm usually anywhere from 22 to 25 yards beyond the line of scrimmage.
So are you the one that kind of, for example, you're on ESPN, are you telling, making sure that your guys on the field, the people on the field, no, you wouldn't be doing that. You're
not the white hat. Yeah,
okay.
I'm not the white hat communicating fouls to the fans. No, that's not me. I'm just on the sideline. If I have a foul, I'll call it, and then I will report what my foul is to the white hat.
And if a guy steps out of bounds and then catches the ball,
then that's where I come in and go incomplete pass. And
right.
Out of bounds.
Illegal touching, right? I always wondered what
every once in a while I haven't had an illegal touching just yet.
Okay.
Just because with that rule, if the defender is riding the offensive player out of the sideline, as soon as there's no contact, as soon as they can make it back into the field of play,
then they're okay.
But they have to establish with 2 feet before they touch the ball.
Interesting. That's good to know. All right. We got an officiating tip, right? From I don't want to say the horse's mouth, but you told us. You got to have some interesting stories, whether it's coaches that, are on the field, verbalizing with you, or fans or stadiums. What are some of your favorite experiences or, that you've gone through officiating?
I'll just share this because this is an experience that other officials that have worked in this stadium in a college environment has shared and expressed to me that this is a exciting, electrifying type environment to work in. And I've had the opportunity to work 2 games in Missoula, Montana. And if you work in Missoula, and I've had opportunity to work 2 Grizz Cats game. So in either Missoula or Bozeman, you have to be careful on what you're saying because the fans, they let you know who they're representing.
And you're talking about before or after the game?
Before and after the game. I mean, in Missoula,
they see you in the restaurant, and
they know exactly who's in town. They know exactly who we are, and they're give you an example. Our Cat Grizz game this last year, we had walked in for breakfast in this restaurant, I believe, downtown Missoula.
Now tell us, because I'm not even aware. You got University of Montana. Are they the Grizz?
They're the Grizz. University of Montana's the Grizz,
and
Montana State's the Bobcats.
The Bobcats. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And so it's a rivalry, just like the
Do
rest
they
of
have Tongans that come out with fire? Between the third and fourth quarter.
No.
But it's a lively environment and a deep rivalry.
Yes, and it's specifically in Missoula because of the way the stadium is. It's pretty much all enclosed. And so when they're yelling and they're cheering, you can hear it. And my first game there about 4 years ago, I've worked a lot of football games as an official. and played in a lot of games as a player. This is my first time where Montana State went into the red zone of Montana, and I've never seen 3 false starts take a team out of the red zone.
Out of the red zone.
And just pretty
Just
much
because the student section
it's
or the
so
whole
loud.
stadium was so loud.
It's so loud.
They couldn't hear the snap
Yeah,
count.
you can't hear the snap count. You have to be silent. As officials, we can't even hear ourselves think. It's so loud. You can't verbally communicate. Everything is nonverbal. It's just so loud and so electrifying. And usually that game is the last game of the season. So you're looking about the week before Thanksgiving.
Wow.
And we were there last year. I believe at kickoff, it was probably about 17 degrees. And this was probably about 1 p.m. in the afternoon for kickoff. And the thing is, you want to have
Was
the
there
game
any
when
blowing snow?
there was no blowing snow at the time of the game, but it was just the temperature just dropped.
Cold.
And I tried to get as much heat on me as I could to keep going.
Do you have to get special Gore-Tex equipment, or do they provide that with you, or you have to get it yourself?
So I have to get what I'm
What you need.
able to get, what I need just to stay warm. And so I have a lot of linings underneath, and then I also have a foul weather shirt with my letter on the back of it, F, and it keeps me pretty warm. And then you have hand warmers. And this is a story I'll share. So last year, before the game started, I'll introduce ourselves to the coaches. And so I went to go introduce myself to Coach Howe, because this is what we do for every game. And I had a pair of hand warmers in my hand, and he didn't have any on. And I went to shake his hand. He's like, "What are you doing with those hand warmers? Take those off." I'm like, "Coach, it's cold out here."
What are you?
He's like, "You don't need those hand warmers." I'm like, "Yes, Coach, it's cold out here." But he didn't have any. He's used to it. But the nice thing, each sideline, they keep the heaters. So the sidelines are pretty toasty. It's just when you're in the middle of the field, you're not on the sidelines.
I remember, actually a couple of events, but when we played at Laramie, Laramie, Wyoming, it can be winter in August. And indeed, we played an early season game in Wyoming. It was September. It was in the 90s when we left Provo. And it was kind of in the 70s or 80s when we arrived in Laramie Friday night. But Saturday morning, there had to be a foot of snow on the ground. And of course, it's that season when it's wet snow. So you know what the fans were doing at War Memorial or whatever stadium in Laramie. We were getting hit with snowballs all afternoon long.
Ouch.
And I wondered about our officials, because they weren't throwing the snowballs at the Wyoming team. Even they should have been, because we were winning by a lot. But in the huddle out on the field, the officials would come into our huddle and say, "You guys okay? Everything okay? Don't look towards the stands. That's the danger, Keep your heads away from the stands." What are you standing in our huddle for? Because you're going to get hit, man.
Exactly.
Said, you ought to be over in that Wyoming huddle. That was the only time I ever thought that the officials weren't the smartest guys in the. But Vic, what an interesting thing. Did you play in any games where you felt that level of enthusiasm, that loud, intense, similar to what you experienced in Montana?
I would have to say most of my games at LaVell Edwards Stadium, because the fans just fill that stadium up. And I'll just never forget my first game in 92. And I just don't recall we played, just because coming from a junior college, you don't play in a stadium where it's full to begin with. And second of all, everybody's yelling and screaming, and it's pretty much packed.
Yeah.
And to get to above 50,000, 60,000 fans, for me, when I first come out Cougar Stadium, I was just like,
How'd that feel?
I didn't know whether I should cry, be happy, jump, whatever. I was just like, man, this is incredible. This is what it's like. This is what it's about. And one of the games we played in '92 was against Penn State, and that was a electrifying game for us as well, because that's one of the games we were probably not supposed to win. But
And I remember they were ranked, and you
Yes.
guys beat them.
yeah, we beat them here on a Friday night, and that was a real loud game that time. And then anytime we played the team up north, it was pretty intense.
Even though their colors were the same as Cordova, we
Yeah.
don't like those U's.
No,
I mean,
No, it's kind of ironic you say that. So I was working a practice, officiating a high school football game a couple weeks ago at Highland High School. They were playing East High, and Coach McBride was on the sideline. And in the community, I've had opportunities to have a conversation with Coach McBride more than one occasion. And even when Coach Edwards, when they had the radio show, that type of thing.
Sure.
And Coach McBride saw me walk off, and I went up, "Hey, Coach, how you doing?" And gave him a nice hug. He said, "Nice to see you." And he's like, "Hey, what they doing letting cougars out here?" I said,
Coach McBride and Coach Edwards had a good relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Even though it was competitive, they were good friends. So anyway, hey, they let cougars out here?
Yeah, when he said that, I just started laughing. What they doing like cougars over here? And I was like, wow. But I mean, he's a good guy, very nice, and just remember those days of their radio show that they had, and just the relationship they'd had amongst each other.
You bet.
It was just phenomenal.
Wow. Well, Vic, do you have, we didn't even talk about, Vic is doing the work of God, in my opinion, because you're working with at-risk kids, who've been in trouble, and not a detention officer, but
I'm a juvenile probation officer.
Juvenile probation officer
in Salt Lake County, primarily.
Good for you. And there aren't a lot of jobs where you're actually your efforts are in behalf of helping those kids get on the right path.
Couldn't have said it any better there, because at the end of the day is I just look at every youth or an adult, because sometimes I do have adults on my caseload, whomever I have an opportunity to work with, I just look at this individual as, what if this was one of my family members?
Yeah.
And
because all of us have family members that have strayed or gotten in trouble, and
something has happened.
Yeah.
Life has happened. And for me, I just
it's the Vic Tarletons of the world that are actually out there looking for them and helping them and bringing some accountability, maybe. What do you feel your biggest job is, besides making them accountable?
I think one of my biggest jobs is not just the accountability piece, but it's trying to establish a healthy, positive relationship, whether I'm somewhat of a role model or if it's some way, somehow, just able to help them through whatever this challenge that they're dealing with in life. And I'll share a couple stories with you. So I've had this year be 30 years of being there with the state of Utah, work with the court juvenile probation, but I've had individuals that I work with on my caseload within the last 10 years or so. They'll send me letters after I've been working with them and basically say, "Thank you for working with me. You may not necessarily remember me, but I was doing such and such, and you came into my life and you helped me get back on the right track. And now I've actually serving in the military. I have children, I have wife, and my children are being raised in a different environment that which I was raised in. And for me, I think there's so many things that we do in life. And to me, sometimes we look to say, am I impacting someone right now? And for me, it's more about as individuals mature and they go on into the adult life, and hopefully in our interactions of me trying to help individuals in whatever situation they're in, hopefully they'll remember some of those times where they're like, oh, this is one of the things that I did with Vic, and it was very positive, and it helped me through this situation. And so I can use this as a skill in this personal situation I'm dealing with. And then I've had been in the community where someone will walk up to me, and when I'm in the community, because of the individuals that I work with, I really don't have an idea unless it's somebody that I recently worked with, because I work with so many individuals. But every once in a while, someone will come up to me and say, hey, Vic. When they say Vic, I'm like, this is somebody that knows me from football or from work. And so they'll usually come up to me and say, Vic, hey, you used to work with me as a probation officer, and I just want to tell you thank you for everything that you've done. And I was at the airport another time, and the gentleman was like, hey, Vic, you remember me? I was like, oh, yeah, I remember you. Thank you for everything. And they said, tell your parents I said thank you as well. Hope your family's doing well. And so I always try to check in with them, because I tell them is, if I work with you one time, over the years, as you mature, you get older, feel free to call me. You can call me anytime. I'll help you out with whatever. It really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, I just want to help the individuals achieve the goals in life that they know that they can achieve, or things they want to attain in life. So it's been, for me, it's been very fulfilling in that aspect of trying to help someone.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because my wife Diana went through a difficult time where some people had been unfair, and she felt it, here. And so she had been actually a temple worker in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And she felt good about that. But she also signed on to help with people in the prisons. And there were some systems set up that were helping these prisoners as they were getting ready to be released to get back into the community. And there were some faith-based but non-denominational organizations that were there to help people open a checking account, and, whether they were involved in the AA 12-step program, things like that, but just to help them get back. And there were qualifications to be able to get into this program. And Diana became one of those who went into the prisons, actually among the prisoners, and then asked those questions of the people who applied. And she said she felt the Spirit of God, sometimes more there than in the temple. And, when, I don't know, it's an interesting thing where you're really doing the work of God when you're helping these people who've been in trouble try to get back. So thank you, Vic.
Oh, no, you're welcome. I just look at it as a calling, and it's
because they probably don't pay you an awful lot.
No.
But I know as an official you make tons. So,
yes.
Because we all know that you paid under the table, right? No, I'm kidding.
On good days and bad days.
Yeah. Vic Tarleton, famous and yet humble and just good teammate. It is so good to meet you. I know we were from different generations at Cordova and at BYU, but it is so fun to befriend you, to become acquaintances now, and thank you for showing up for Beyond the Game.
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to be here and participate in Beyond the Game, and anything that I can do in the future, help out wherever, whomever, whatever, feel free, and I'll do whatever I can.
No, we'll lean on you for some of that. Thank you. Thank you for watching another episode of Beyond the Game. Remember to click here to subscribe and click here to watch our recent videos. Also, please follow us on social media, and remember, go Cougs.